Tensions are reaching a boiling point in Venezuela. It's all happening on the heels of the government blocking a recall referendum aimed at ousting President Nicolas Maduro. In a bid to silence growing protests, the president announced a 40% boost in the minimum salary. But there's no sign it will derail more anti-government rallies. CCTV's Stephen Gibbs is in Caracas.
Yes, well, it's certainly been an eventful day here in Caracas, with many events happening almost at the same time. The day began with a major protest outside the National Assembly here in Caracas. We saw a very large crowd outside it. These were pro-government supporters, apparently trying to force their way into the building. Several volleys of tear gas were let off by the security forces to prevent that happening. Inside the assembly, which has, remember, an opposition majority since elections last December, delegates were voting to put President Maduro on trial. The opposition says that the president is operating outside the constitution, and also, they say, driving this country to economic ruin. Now, I think it's fair to say that there's almost zero chance of President Maduro attending any sort of trial, but this does reflect really the polarization between the two sides here, with both sides accusing the other of acting outside the law. As the sense of a final showdown really looms here, we've also been seeing the aftermath of yesterday's nationwide protests, probably the biggest since 2002. We now know one policeman was killed in the clashes, and there were more than 100 arrests and dozens of injuries. So what happens now? Well, there are efforts to defuse the situation. The Vatican is still hoping to mediate dialogue between the opposition and the government. But the big question here is who will show up to that. President Maduro says he will, and he gave a bleak warning to his political opponents who are still considering boycotting the talks.
Si no es el diálogo, ¿qué?
If not dialogue, then what? What is the alternative to dialogue? War, violence, confrontation between Venezuelan men and women?
President Maduro there referring to talks which are still scheduled to take place on Sunday. The opposition position is that they don't want just talks about talks. They want some concessions from the government, particularly a reinstating of this recall referendum, which the government abruptly halted last week. President Maduro also announced that the minimum wage here was being raised 40% as of November the 1st. Now, that's the fourth raise this year. But remember, Venezuela does have inflation currently running at about 700% a year. And the next development we're waiting for here in Venezuela is tomorrow, Friday, when the opposition has called for a general strike. The government says any businesses taking part in that do risk being expropriated. Stephen Gibbs, CCTV, Caracas.